different places are experiencing it in different ways. Where I am, people are, you know, in the US and especially in Texas, everybody is independent and they have to be free. And so people are deciding that they if they don't believe that there is a problem, then they're not going to have a problem. So we will see how well that works for them. I am, of course, almost 67 myself, so I'm, from the age point of view, more likely to have a problem. So I am paying more attention to, I'm being more conservative than other people are who are maybe younger and more focused on the need that they feel in themselves to be able to be out and be active. And I think that's probably a good place for us to start. It's understandable that everybody feels a need to be active externally, because that's perfectly, it's a natural thing from the evolutionary point of view. We evolved outside. We moved around. We were always active, and we were always focusing on things externally, both to locate food and to try to avoid danger. And so that's a natural tendency. And even though we're living in big cities and things are much more different and more complex, that tendency is still very much inside us. That tendency to want to be alert to any danger and to want to nourish ourselves also. And in our bodies, those two basic principles are there. And those two principles are the principle of nourishing ourselves and the principle of defending ourselves. And there's two different sets of hormones. There's two different parts of the nervous system. The organism has both these two agendas, both these two priorities. And so it's natural to want to, for the organism. I'm not talking about the mind right now. I'm talking about the body. It's natural for the body to want to take care of itself, to nourish itself primarily, and to worry about danger secondarily, because we have to eat every day. We have to breathe all the time. Everything that we take in, we have to digest. So we have to focus on this mainly if we want to be well nourished, if we want to be satisfied as organisms. The kind of world we live in means we're under stress all the time, and that stress activates the sympathetic nervous system. It activates the hormones like cortisol that promote attention and stress and the fight or flight syndrome. And so when we think about what people are experiencing right now, we think about the fact that, number one, and Fernando was just telling me this, and this was my experience also, both of us have for the past many years been very active, traveling from here to there and there to here, and this part of the world to that part of the world. And now suddenly that's not possible. And I have been able to adapt fairly well because I can get out and walk, and because I can communicate the way we're communicating right now. And Fernando, I believe, has been similarly adapting. But many people cannot adapt that way for whatever reason. It's very important to be adaptable. And it is a challenge to adapt to a situation where everything is going on like this, and suddenly you stop. If you have ever driven in a car, for example, and you're driving along at a high speed, and suddenly something comes in front of you, and you have to slam on the brake, you know how that feels. You know that your body feels shocked. And that shock is experienced at all levels of your organism. It's experienced in your physical body. It's experienced in your energetic body. It's experienced in your mind, your emotions, and everything. And this is an important thing that we need to realize has happened to everyone. There's been a sudden shock. There's been a sudden reduction of speed to very slow. We've gone from very fast to very slow, and we did it suddenly. And when you do something like that suddenly, there is always a shock. And it's similar to the kind of thing that happens when you take you have a lake or a pond of water, and it's very calm and quiet. But then you take a rock and you throw it into the pond, and there's a big splash. That's the shock. But after the splash, there are small waves, there are ripples that continue to move away from the place where the shock happened. So even if you feel like you've dealt with that shock fairly well, still in your nervous system, some of those small waves, some of those ripples are still showing up there. And it's, in my opinion, very important to be actively doing things in order to address this situation, especially because there are two emotions that tend to make these ripples even more pronounced, even bigger. And those two emotions are fear and grief. Fear and grief. Now, grief, of course, some people are very much experiencing either grief over the loss of their business, and of course, some people grieve over the loss of a loved one to the disease. But lots of people are experiencing fear. And fear is a useful emotion. All of our emotions are useful. The problem happens when we have occasionally too little, but more often too much of those emotions. And fear is useful because certain things are very dangerous in the world. And it's good to be afraid of those things that are dangerous so you will move away from them. That's what fear does. It moves you away from things that are dangerous. Now, what happens when there's a big shock, like there was with this pandemic and the lockdown, is that itself creates fear. And that makes the energy, the vitality of your body want to move away from, want to sort of collapse in on itself. And sometimes what happens is people will literally collapse. You will find that your or someone's chest will sort of cave in a little like this. They'll bend forward a little. They're protecting the heart and the lungs. They're protecting the critical organs in the body by kind of collapsing like that. Some people, when they feel that fear, they go to the opposite extreme. They open up even more. They say, I'm not afraid. I'm going to go ahead and do whatever I normally do. Both of those are the same thing. They're in different directions, but they're both a reaction to that fear. Fear is something that you have a specific idea of what you're afraid of. Anxiety is something where it's a generalized feeling that things are not right, but you don't know exactly what to be afraid of. And in some ways, of course, anxiety is worse because not knowing makes it much more difficult for us to feel like we have any control over the situation at all. So I think in this situation where we are right now, we need to acknowledge that we don't have control over the big global situation. We don't have control over other people around us. We do have control over what we do. And we have to be aware that even if we do everything perfectly, we may still get the virus. And we also have to remember that even somebody who does nothing perfectly may not at all get the virus. Both of these things are possible. And this is what the reality is. The reality is none of us know whether we will fall sick, and none of us know whether, if we fall sick, whether we're just it will be very mild or it will be serious. We'll have to stay in bed for 2 weeks, but then we'll be okay, or whether it will be very serious. No one really can predict that. It's a very unusual disease that way. That creates even more anxiety. That creates even more fear of the disease. So what I'm going to encourage people to do right now is to just, first of all, pay attention to your breathing. Because when there is something legitimately to be worried about, and we don't want to spend all of our time worrying, but we legitimately need to be aware of and to pay some attention to this disease. We have to worry about it. We should not be thinking about it all the time in the sense of being alarmed. We should be aware of what we need to do at all times and use our energy, not wondering what's going to happen, but focusing on everything we need to do, putting on the mask, making sure we're away from people who are not wearing masks, making sure that we spend as much time out of doors as possible, in the sun as much as possible, doing those things we know that are good for us, avoiding those things we know are not good. But there's always going to be in your tissues, in your body, a certain amount of tension, because we don't know where the danger may be coming from. We don't know how big the danger may be. So in order for us to address this most carefully and most effectively, we need to be as calm as possible. Now, it's going to be difficult to be perfectly calm, but we don't have to be perfectly calm. And one reason it would be difficult to be perfectly calm is because the people around us are not going to be calm, and we will be mirroring, they will be having an effect on us just like we have an effect on them. It's much better for us to be calm and trying to encourage other people to be calm than to have other people be agitated and then for us to become agitated because of those other people. So it's not only important for you and your own health that you should be calm, it's important for everyone around you that you should be as calm as possible, and so that way you can not react to things, but you can act when you know what you can do and when the time is right to act. So we always want to act instead of react. What most people are doing nowadays is reacting. They're reacting to the disease, They're reacting to the loss of their jobs. They're reacting to the economic panic. They're reacting to everything. But we want to remain able to focus on, able to function with the help of our clarity, the clarity of our minds. I've said it many times, and I'm just about to say it again. The worst time to panic is when there is a crisis. If you have to, you can panic after the crisis. But during the crisis, you have to be focused so that with the help of that focus, you can navigate the crisis as best you can. You will not do it perfectly. There may be problems, but dealing with each problem as it shows up is the most effective way to deal with the situation. Definitely trying to ignore it is the wrong way, and trying to do too many things is also the wrong way. It's much better to figure out a calm pattern of life and follow that calm pattern. And that way you help to generate a nice momentum of health in yourself. One of the things that is true about most people nowadays, one of the things that is true, especially about people who are living very fast, intense lives, is that human beings have a lot of inflammation in their bodies. And that inflammation is one thing that we are seeing makes this virus worse. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are keeping the inflammation, both of the body and the mind, as under control, as minimal as possible, as little as possible. So the first place to do this, and you've heard this many times, but you're hearing it again, the first place to do this is to pay attention to your breathing. Pay attention to making sure that you're always breathing with your abdomen, with your diaphragm. That's the only muscle that we use for breathing. So you're breathing with your diaphragm. You're breathing very slowly. You're breathing very regularly. And you are not focusing on anything other than breathing at least once every hour. So I think this is something that's worth doing. You can set a timer for once every hour, for example, and whenever the timer goes off, just for 1 minute or 2 minutes, or if you have the time, 5 minutes, stop everything that you're doing right in the middle of whatever you're doing, unless you're cooking, and just sit down and breathe. And pay attention to what is going on in your mind at that moment. Don't comment on it, because you will, but just pay attention to it, because often you may find that in your mind at that moment is a thought of what is going to happen next, or in your mind in that moment is a thought of something. Just be aware at that moment, whenever that alarm goes off, what is in your mind, and pay attention to that. Don't comment on it. Pay attention to that, so that will help to teach you what sort of things are going on in your mind most of the time. Everybody has an ongoing dialogue that is going on all the time. It's part of what's called, or what scientists nowadays call, the default mode network. It's basically when you're not doing anything else. It's like with your car. The car is on, but you're not going anywhere. So in English, we say the car is idling. It is idle. It is standing around doing nothing. But the engine is on. So there are processes that are continuing so that at any moment it can move. The brain works a similar way. There are processes working in it all the time when we're conscious, to assist us to, at a moment's notice, make a decision. Should I run away? Should I attack? Should I stay where I am? What do I do next? So it's useful once every hour to just stop and breathe and pay attention to what you have been thinking about. Don't comment on it. Maybe it was something stupid. Maybe it was something important. Just pay attention to it and allow yourself to not think about it or anything else. Allow yourself only to focus on your breathing for 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes, so that you can disconnect from those thoughts, because there is always a tendency to create a train of thoughts. You will have one thought, and that will lead to another thought, which leads to another thought, which connects to another thought. And that's exactly what we don't want to have happen, because when your thoughts get into a certain channel, a certain rut, and everyone has certain channels they tend to get into. When your thoughts get into a certain rut, then you will find yourself being dragged into some emotional state that may not be useful to you. So what's important is to be able to pay attention to where your ruts are, to where your patterns are. So what we need to do now is that I'm going to encourage everyone to close your eyes. Close your eyes just wherever it is that you are and focus on your breathing. And you will probably notice when your eyes are closed that you're still seeing colors, you're still seeing shapes. And that's because even though we think about sight as something that is located in the eye, in reality, sight is something that uses the eye, but it can use things other than the eye if we are trying to look on the inside of the body. Using the eye is the way that the sense of sight works on the outside of the body. But inside the body, we can use the inner eye anywhere. So just breathe for a moment. Focus on your breathing. Breathe very deeply into your abdomen. Breathe very slowly. And just pay attention to the fact that behind your eyelids, there is this inner eye, this eye on the inside. And if you're very concerned about what's going on in the outside world, it will be more difficult for you to get this inner eye to function well. So just for a few minutes while we have our eyes closed, just for a few minutes, don't worry about what's happening outside. Pay attention to what's happening on the inside. And just sort of look around in your body, just like you were wandering in a cave or in a forest. And the more you get used to using your inner eye, the easier it will be to see how things are in different parts of your body, and to be able to decide which parts of your body are really calm and cooperative, and which parts are uneasy and anxious and disturbed. So you can experiment with this in any way you want to. You will never have any problem looking around on the inside of your body with your inner eye. But for right now, please focus your inner eye on the area right around where your heart is located, in the middle of your chest. And don't try to visualize anything. Don't try to see anything. Just let your eyes settle on that, just as if you were looking out over the ocean. There's not really anything you can see on the ocean except maybe the place where the water stops and the air begins. So similarly, in your inside your body, don't try to visualize the heart or anything like that. Just pay attention to that area of your body using this inner eye. And our inside sense of sight, try to feel how every time your heart beats, vitality goes to all parts of your body. It goes into the blood. The vitality is in the bloodstream. Vitality, we call that chi or prana. So that life force goes into your bloodstream, and then it goes out all parts of your body, to your arms and your legs, and to your abdomen and thorax, and to your head. It goes everywhere. And so what we want is, as this energy goes out into your body, we want that to be energy that's as calm as possible. That's why you're breathing calmly. Because if you're not getting oxygen, and if you're not getting prana or chi or vital energy or whatever you want to call it, if you're not getting that to your tissues will feel like they are being starved, because that is their nourishment. And that will make them fearful. That will make them anxious. And if all of the cells in your body are anxious, that's going to make you particularly anxious also. So what is very important in this time where everything is creating anxiety and fear, what's very important is to make your body as calm as possible. And when your body is calm, it will be much easier to make your mind calm. If your body is not calm, making your mind calm is going to be very, very difficult. So what we want to do is continue focusing on just how your breathing is working, how that breath gets into your heart, how it moves from your heart out into all parts of your body, comes back to the heart, moves back out again, comes back to the heart, etc. So now that you've been doing this for a few minutes, please open your eyes halfway. Open your eyes halfway so you can see the room around you. But you can also still feel like what it was like when you were in that previous state. And breathe another 3 or 4 times in this condition of having your eyes half open and half closed. And then open your eyes again. And now as you look out, try to maintain that sense of calm that you had while you had your eyes closed. Try to maintain that sense of calm as you reconnect to the outside world. If you can do this every day, if you can do this a couple of times a day, this will have a substantial effect on how you interact with the world around you, what kind of expectations you have, what kind of desires you have. All of these things are coming up from inside you, and they're being projected against all of these external things that we think are important. When what is really important for all of us is to be able to maintain our life, to maintain our vitality as the prana circulates within us, and to continue to assist our bodies and minds to move forward in a proper and harmonious way. And that's what life is all about. Now, I have a very limited period of time remaining, only about 10 minutes. And so if you have any questions, I would encourage you either to write them on the Q&A function of the site, or to send them preferably on the Q&A portion of the site. That way everybody can see them. While I'm waiting to see if there are any questions, let me say that this is a particularly good time to be not stimulating your nervous system any more than is absolutely necessary. So in the past, you may have enjoyed drinking a double espresso in the morning and another espresso or two in the afternoon. You're much better having less coffee, less tea, less alcohol, less of all of these things, because your nervous system, remember, is like that, it's like that pond, like that lake where the rock has fallen into it and it is now moving up and down like this. And all of those stimulants will make this pattern more intense, that will make it worse. So what we want to do is to try to encourage this to calm down. So all of the type of nervine herbs that you are familiar with, probably, chamomilla, or what that's called manzanilla in Spanish, and valerian and passion flower. There's so many nervine herbs. What that means is it makes your nerves a little bit more calm. Ashwagandha is a very fine thing for this purpose, if you happen to be in India or have access to it in some way. So these things are good because they help to make the nervous system not quite have so many waves in it, but it will not make your mind clearer for you. Your mind becomes clear when you train your mind to become clear by meditating, for example. And there are many ways to meditate, but all of them involve disconnecting from this dialogue that we have with and reconnecting to something. Sometimes it's a god or a goddess. Sometimes it is a scriptures in a book. Sometimes it is movement of energy. It may be anything. As far as dietary advice, I see there are two questions about that. For most people, if you are really out of balance, if you feel really uneasy, you're better off having soup. Something very easy to digest, warm, promotes the digestive fire. If you are feeling healthy, then you should definitely raw food, salad, green vegetables. All these are they're the sorts of things that are really desirable for the body at this point in our lives, because we're living such abnormal lives. So fresh, green, leafy vegetables, most important. But if you are very uneasy, they will be more difficult to digest. So think about it in terms of how uneasy you are, or how uneasy the person is that you're trying to cook for. If they're very uneasy, give them soup, give them, put everything in the soup, put some beans and some rice and some vegetables, cook it all into the soup. That makes it much more digestible. If you were feeling more balanced, then you can afford to eat more things, but especially avoid things that are very concentrated, very heavy, very difficult to digest, because that will make it less. You will have to put more energy into digesting. More of your blood will go down there, and you'll have less blood and less energy to be able to think clearly about what it is you need to be doing. And usually it is better not to eat too often during the day. But at the moment, and especially when you are feeling uneasy, it's better to have small meals 3 or 4 or 5 times a day even. Because if you're very uneasy, your digestive juices are going to not flow as well, because your whole body will be constricted. So if your digestive juices are not flowing well, instead of eating 1 or 2 bigger meals, eat 3 or 4 smaller meals. You can digest them more easily. And then you will digest it, you will burn off that energy, and then you can have a little bit more. And then hopefully things will move in the right direction. It's very important during this period. It's always important, but it's even more important to drink hot water. We're moving into the hot season, and here in Texas, it's going to be a minimum of 35 every day for the next 4 months. Fortunately, it doesn't get too hot here. It rarely gets to, even 42, but it's going to be 35, 38 for the next 4 months. So we have to drink lots of water, and people love here to drink ice water. But ice water is not a good thing to drink, because digestion happens in a warm environment. When you eat food, the temperature of your digestive organs increases, because you need that warmer temperature to make the enzymes work properly, the enzymes that digest your food. So when you eat a lot of ice, that makes your digestive juices, first of all, they can't be released as easily, and second, they're not at the proper temperature to make that digestion happen properly. My grandmother, who lived her entire life without any air conditioning until the very end of it, she always said that in her experience, drinking something hot on a hot afternoon was much more satisfying than drinking ice water. And that was because, and many people feel that way, and I feel that way too, because you drink something hot, it causes you to sweat, and that by sweating, you get some of the heat out of your body. If you drink something cold, temporarily your tongue and maybe your gut will feel cool, but then your body will react against it and create more heat in order to heat it up again. Spicy food in a small amount is useful because that does help. I mean, the purpose of spice, and that's why in tropical countries there are lots of spicy things, because the spices do help the digestive juices flow. The problem in places like tropical countries is people get addicted to them. Then they eat a lot, big handfuls of chilies and things like that. And that makes your digestion worse because it's too much heat, it's too much stimulation. So mild amounts of spices, especially things like ginger and cumin, and of course, fennel, coriander, these things that, cardamom, these things that are not too intense, and that have some other good qualities. These are very good for, in small amounts, to get the digestive juices flowing, to encourage the heat to flow out of the body, and to discourage inflammation, which happens when the heat gets trapped in the body. So the citrus, especially lemon and lime, in small amounts, especially in your water, for example, is very good. Garlic can be good, provided that it is not heating your system up too much. And the same goes for onions. Both of them can be very good, but both of them do tend to heat your system up. And if you have a tendency to be, for your body to be hot anyway, then garlic and onions are just going to make them hotter, and you will be better off having things that are not as hot, like fennel, which, as I recall, is in inojo. So the most important thing is to try to always make your organism, thank you. Try to always make your organism work in a way that is nice and calm and balanced. And the calmer your mind is, the easier it will be to pay attention to what's going on in your system. And the last thing that I have time to say right at the moment is that it is definitely good to take out 1 day a week, 1 day every 2 weeks, and to fast. And that doesn't mean that you only have to fast on water. That means that if for some people water will be fine. For some people, maybe you would fast on fruit juice. For some people, maybe you need a little more nourishment. So maybe you, in India, they call it khichdi, but it could be any kind of grain and bean cooked together into soup, into thin, not too thick soup with plenty of liquid in it. And that's the only one thing you eat that whole day. And that helps your body get rid of all the metabolic toxins that have accumulated in your system. So I am unfortunately going to have to disconnect, but I am very glad that I had this opportunity to connect with you and to see Senor Del Canto again. It's always a pleasure to see him, and I look forward to seeing him again before too long.
Okay, Robert, thank you very much. And we will stay a little bit. We have Dr. Arun and Dr. Divya.
Excellent, excellent.
From Care Ayurveda in Pune. So they will be able to respond some questions if they are able to stay.
Wonderful.
So Robert, thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Namaskar.